millions of dollars. Do it for the carrots.
I did it for love and lip syncing and things.
A woman stands in a quiet kitchen in the small town of Andes, New York, decades removed from screaming fans and flashing cameras. And if you passed her on the street today, you probably wouldn't recognize her. That is exactly how she wants it. Susan Dey, the girl once known to millions as Laurie Partridge, spent the first half of her life being watched by the entire country. She has spent the second half trying to disappear from it. And the story of how she got from one life to the other is far more painful than the smiling teenager on the Partridge Family bus ever let on. Susan Horlock Dey was born on December 10, 1952, in Pekin, Illinois, the daughter of a journalist father and a nurse mother. Her early years looked stable enough on the surface, but that stability broke apart when Susan was only 8 years old and her mother died. It is the kind of loss that reshapes a child from the inside, and by most accounts, it did exactly that. Susan grew quieter, more guarded, more comfortable observing the world than participating loudly in it. Her father remarried, the family settled into a new rhythm in Westchester County, New York, and Susan grew into a teenager who rarely spoke about what she was feeling. That silence, born out of grief, would later become one of the defining traits of her entire public life. It was her stepmother who sent a photograph of teenage Susan to a modeling agency in New York, and the camera responded to her instantly. She had the kind of face that photographed as calm and open at the same time, and modeling work followed quickly. She appeared in teen magazines and educational booklets aimed at young girls, and somewhere along the way, a photo reportedly made its way to producers at ABC who were casting a new family sitcom about a widowed mother and her children who form a pop group. Susan had no acting training. She had never performed for a camera in the traditional sense. And yet, at 17 years old, she won the role of Laurie Partridge, and her life changed permanently within a matter of weeks. The Partridge Family premiered in September 1970, and almost overnight, a quiet, grieving teenager from Westchester became one of the most recognized faces in America. The show, built around Shirley Jones as the widowed mother and David Cassidy as the family's teen idol son, became a cultural phenomenon, complete with real hit records, sold-out fan clubs, and a level of attention that few adults, let alone teenagers, are equipped to handle. Susan was suddenly a symbol, not just a person. Publicists compared her to Audrey Hepburn. Magazines dissected her hairstyle, her wardrobe, her expressions. She later told the Washington Post that during those years, she felt like an adult without actually being one, caught in a strange gap between adult responsibility and teenage uncertainty, with millions of eyes on her the entire time. That pressure did not stay abstract. It attacked her body. Susan has spoken publicly, in her own words, about developing an eating disorder during her years on the Partridge Family, describing a period when control over food felt like the only control she had left in a life that otherwise belonged to everyone else but her. In interviews given later in life, she described how the disorder had no name at the time, how nobody around her understood what was happening, and how withdrawing into restrictive eating became a way of shutting out a world that had become too loud, too demanding, and too invasive. It is a detail that reframes every glossy photograph from that era. The girl smiling on magazine covers was quietly fighting a battle that television audiences never saw and never would have understood, even if they had. Alongside that private struggle came a heartbreak that played out, at least in part, in the public eye. On screen, Susan and David Cassidy played brother and sister. Off-screen, the two became close, and over time, Susan developed real feelings for her co-star. According to Shirley Jones, quoted years later in Woman's World, David did not return those feelings and did not treat Susan well during that period, and it broke her heart. It was a wound made worse by fame itself, playing out inside a show watched by tens of millions of people who had no idea a real heartbreak was happening just off camera. And that wound reopened decades later, in 1994, when David Cassidy published a memoir titled Come On, Get Happy, Fear and Loathing on the Partridge Family Bus, in which he wrote candidly about his history with Susan. Whatever David intended by including those details, Susan, by most accounts, experienced it as a deeply personal chapter of her life being handed over to the public without her consent. She never responded publicly with a rebuttal or a memoir of her own. She simply went quieter. When the Partridge Family ended in 1974 after 4 seasons, Susan faced a problem that has ended the careers of many former child stars. Hollywood could not see past the character that had made her famous. She spent much of the late 1970s and early 1980s working steadily but without a defining role, appearing in television movies, a Little Women miniseries, and films like Looker alongside Albert Finney, slowly trying to prove she was capable of more than being America's favorite pop group daughter. That persistence finally paid off in 1986, when she was cast as Grace Van Owen, a sharp, morally complicated deputy district attorney in the new NBC legal drama LA Law. The role gave Susan something she had spent more than a decade trying to find, which was a chance to be judged as an actress in the present rather than as a teenager frozen in reruns. She played Grace for 6 seasons, earned 3 Emmy nominations, and won a Golden Globe for the role in 1988, finally forcing an industry that had underestimated her to take her seriously. But even at the height of that professional triumph, Susan's private battles had not disappeared, they had simply moved further out of view. During her LA Law years, it came out that she had been attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and Susan later told Parade magazine how furious she was that her sobriety, something she considered entirely her own business, had been exposed by tabloids after what she believed was a planted informant inside a support meeting. For a woman who had spent her entire adult life learning to guard her privacy after childhood loss and teenage overexposure, this was not a minor tabloid embarrassment. It was proof that even her recovery, the most vulnerable part of her adult life, was not safe from public consumption. It helps explain why, as the years went on, Susan chose to give fewer interviews, make fewer public appearances, and reveal less and less about her personal world. In 1993, while still working steadily, Susan told the Inquirer that she was still trying to overcome her anorexia, making clear that the disorder that began on the Partridge Family set had never fully left her, even as an accomplished, award-winning adult actress. It is a sobering admission, and it underscores something important about her story. Fame did not create her pain, but it magnified it, broadcast it, and in some ways made it harder to heal from privately. She left LA Law in 1992, later saying she stepped away once the role stopped offering new challenges, and continued with more limited television work through the 1990s and into the early 2000s, including a brief return as Grace Van Owen in a 2002 television movie and 2 guest appearances on Third Watch in 2004. After that, she simply stopped taking new acting roles, without any dramatic farewell or retirement announcement. Away from the cameras, Susan built a quieter life that has remained largely shielded from public view. She married television producer Bernard Safronsky in 1988, a marriage that friends have described as calm and grounding, built around ordinary life rather than industry spectacle. She is also mother to a daughter from her first marriage, to talent agent Lenny Hershen, a relationship that gave her a role no fan club or magazine cover could touch. Reports indicate she and Bernard have lived for years in Andes, a small town in upstate New York, far removed from Los Angeles and the entertainment industry that once defined her entire identity. What makes Susan's story more layered than a simple tale of a star who faded away is what she chose to do with her privacy once she had reclaimed it. Rather than disappearing into total anonymity, she has quietly devoted years to a cause connected to her own history of vulnerability, serving as a board member of the Rape Treatment Center at UCLA's Medical Center and co-narrating a documentary about campus sexual assault alongside her former LA Law co-star Corbin Bernsen. It is not the kind of work that generates headlines or red carpet appearances, and that appears to be exactly the point. It is advocacy carried out on her own terms, away from the machinery of publicity that once turned her private pain into public entertainment.